The bus was already crowded when it pulled up to the stop, packed with tired faces and heavy silence, the kind that settles in after a long day. People stood shoulder to shoulder, holding onto rails, avoiding eye contact, each lost in their own world. The air smelled like rain-soaked jackets and warm brakes. In the back, near the window, sat a black teen named Marcus, earbuds dangling around his neck, school backpack resting between his feet. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from more than just homework, more than just a long day. His eyes followed the blur of the city outside, unaware that in a few minutes, one small decision would change the course of his life forever. At the next stop, a pregnant white woman stepped onto the bus. She moved carefully, one hand on her lower back, the other gripping the pole as the bus lurched forward. Her belly was unmistakable, her face pale with strain. For a brief moment, no one moved. People noticed, but they didn't act. Some looked away. Others pretended not to see her at all. The bus rolled on, and the silence grew heavier. Marcus noticed her almost immediately. He watched as she shifted her weight, trying to stay steady, her lips pressed together as if she didn't want to complain or ask for help. Marcus hesitated. His legs ached from basketball practice, and his mind was already thinking about the long walk home after this ride. But something tugged at him. Maybe it was the way the bus swayed or the tired look in her eyes. Maybe it was how his mom had raised him, always saying, "Do the right thing even when no one's watching." Without making a big show of it, Marcus stood up and gently tapped the seat. "You can sit here," he said quietly. The woman looked surprised, almost startled. For a second, she didn't move, as if she wasn't sure he was talking to her. Then she smiled, a small, grateful smile that reached her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, easing herself into the seat with a sigh of relief. Marcus nodded and moved aside, gripping the pole as the bus continued forward. Around them, a few passengers glanced over, then went back to their phones. To most people it was just a kind moment, nothing more. But the woman kept looking up at Marcus. She studied his face, his worn sneakers, the frayed strap of his backpack. There was something thoughtful in her expression, like she was holding on to a feeling she didn't want to lose. As the bus rattled along, she reached into her purse, pulling out a small notepad and a pen. Marcus noticed the movement out of the corner of his eye but didn't think much of it. He was used to being invisible in places like this. She began to write, slowly and carefully, pausing now and then as if choosing the right words mattered. Her hand rested protectively on her belly between sentences. Marcus looked away, staring at an ad above the door, counting stops in his head. He had no idea what was being written, or why his chest suddenly felt tight. When the bus approached her stop, the woman carefully tore the page from the notepad. She folded it once, then twice. Standing up, she turned toward Marcus. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle but steady. "I want you to have this." She pressed the folded note into his hand before he could respond. Marcus froze. Okay," he said, confused. Their eyes met for a brief second. Hers were shiny, filled with something deeper than gratitude. Something heavy. Something emotional. She smiled again, then turned and made her way toward the door, disappearing into the crowd as the bus doors hissed shut behind her. Marcus looked down at the note resting in his palm. It felt heavier than paper should. Around him, the bus noise faded, replaced by a loud ringing in his ears. He thought about opening it right away, but something stopped him. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was the strange feeling that whatever was written inside wasn't just a thank you. He tucked the note into his pocket, heart pounding as the bus continued down the street. His stop was still a few minutes away, but time felt stretched, slow and uneasy. He replayed the moment over and over in his head. Why had she written him a note? What could she possibly have to say to him after such a small act of kindness? Marcus stepped off the bus into the cool evening air, the city buzzing around him. Cars honked. People hurried past. Life moved on like nothing special had happened. But he felt different. The note burned in his pocket, demanding attention. He walked a block, then another, before finally stopping under a flickering streetlight. His hands shook slightly as he pulled out the folded paper. He stared at it for a long moment, breathing deeply. Part of him expected something simple, maybe a few kind words. Another part of him felt a strange sense of dread, as if opening the note would unlock something he wasn't ready to face. He thought about his mom working double shifts, about the teachers who underestimated him, about the dreams he kept quiet because they felt too big to say out loud. With one slow movement, Marcus unfolded the note. His eyes scanned the first line and his breath caught. Whatever was written there made his knees feel weak, his heart race, and his entire world tilt in a way he never saw coming. He had no idea that a single seat on a crowded bus, given without expectation, would lead him to this moment. And as he stood there under that dim streetlight, realizing what the note truly meant, one question echoed in his mind: how could one small act of kindness carry consequences this powerful? And just like that, Marcus understood that his life was about to change, but not in the way he ever imagined. The countdown clock hit 5 seconds and the entire room held its breath. Laughter, half-finished drinks, and loud music faded into the background as everyone's eyes locked onto the glowing numbers on the TV. 4, 3, 2, 1. Cheers exploded, confetti flew, and people hugged each other like the past year had officially been erased. It was New Year's Eve, the night of fresh starts and bold promises. But while everyone else was celebrating what they hoped the new year would bring, one person in that room was about to say something that would silence it all. His name was Daniel, and up until that moment he blended in like everyone else. Mid-30s, average build, quiet smile, the kind of guy people described as nice without really knowing much about him. He stood near the edge of the living room, holding a plastic cup he hadn't touched in a while, watching his friends celebrate. They were shouting resolutions into the air. I'm quitting junk food. I'm going to the gym every day. This is my year. The usual promises people make every January, knowing deep down most of them won't last past February. Daniel smiled along, nodding when someone looked his way. But inside his heart was racing. His palms were sweaty and his chest felt tight. He had rehearsed this moment in his head for weeks, maybe even months. Still, now that the new year had officially arrived, doubt crept in. Was this really the right time? Was he ready for the reactions, the questions, the shock that would follow? Someone turned the music down and shouted, "All right, resolutions. Let's hear them." People gathered closer, forming a loose circle. One by one they spoke. Safe goals. Predictable plans. Applause followed each one, along with jokes and teasing. Then someone pointed at Daniel. "What about you, man? You're always quiet. What's your New Year resolution?" The room turned toward him. Dozens of eyes. Smiling faces. Expectant silence. Daniel swallowed hard. For a moment he considered brushing it off with something simple. Travel more. Save money. Learn a new skill. Any normal New Year resolution would do. But he knew if he didn't say it now, he never would. The weight of the past year pressed down on him. The sleepless nights. The secret he carried alone. The decision that had slowly reshaped his entire life without anyone noticing. He cleared his throat. I've thought about this a lot, he said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. And I know this might sound crazy, but my New Year resolution is to completely disappear from the life I've been living. The room went silent. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. Disappear how? Another person asked, half smiling. Daniel didn't smile back. He looked around the room, meeting each face, friends he'd known for years, people who thought they knew him. I mean, starting over. New city. New name. No contact. No safety net. A few smiles faded. Someone shifted uncomfortably. Wait, are you serious? His closest friend asked. Daniel nodded. The air felt heavy now, charged with confusion and disbelief. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a dramatic toast. This was something else entirely. People started talking at once. Questions overlapped. Why would you do that? Did something happen? You can't just disappear. Daniel listened, but his thoughts drifted. He remembered the moment months ago when this idea first planted itself in his mind. Standing alone in his apartment at 2 a.m., staring at a phone that never rang anymore. Realizing that the life he'd built looked good from the outside but felt empty when no one was watching. To everyone else, Daniel was doing fine. Stable job. Reliable friend. No major drama. But they didn't see the quiet regrets piling up year after year. The dreams he put on hold until they faded. The choices he made to please others while slowly losing himself. This resolution wasn't about running away. At least that's what he told himself. It was about survival. A woman across the room spoke softly. So you're just going to leave everything behind? All of us. Her voice wasn't angry. It was hurt. Daniel felt it hit him like a punch. I don't want to hurt anyone, he said. But I can't keep living like this. I need to know who I am without expectations. Without history. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking the first minutes of the new year. No one was cheering anymore. Some people looked worried. Others looked offended. A few looked genuinely scared for him. New Year's resolutions were supposed to be inspiring, not unsettling. They were supposed to make people laugh, not question reality. His friend stepped closer. You don't have to disappear to change your life, he said. You can stay. We can help. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. And that's what makes this so hard. Because staying is easier. And easier is what kept me stuck. No one had a response to that. The party never fully recovered. Conversations restarted, but quieter now. Music came back on, but it felt distant. People kept glancing at Daniel like he might vanish at any moment. He stood there, feeling both lighter and more exposed than ever before. Saying it out loud made it real. There was no turning back now. Later that night, as people began to leave, his closest friend pulled him aside. You're not telling us everything, he said. It wasn't a question. Daniel hesitated. There was more. Something deeper. A reason he hadn't shared. Something that turned this resolution from shocking to dangerous, from bold to irreversible. Daniel looked toward the door, where cold January air seeped in every time it opened. He imagined himself walking through an unfamiliar city, carrying nothing but a small bag and a past no one knew. He thought about the one thing he hadn't told anyone yet. The real reason this New Year resolution wasn't just a plan, but a deadline. He took a breath, opened his mouth to speak, and then stopped. Because once he said it, there would be no going back. Daniel lowered his voice, not because the room was loud, but because the words felt too heavy to let out all at once. His friend waited, searching his face, but Daniel shook his head slightly. Not tonight, he said. I just needed you to know that this isn't some impulse decision. His friend studied him for a long second, then nodded, though concern lingered in his eyes. They hugged briefly, the kind of hug that felt like it was trying to hold something together that was already slipping. When Daniel finally left the party, the city felt strangely quiet for a New Year's night. Fireworks echoed in the distance, but the streets near his apartment were nearly empty. He walked instead of calling a ride, letting the cold air sting his face. Every step felt deliberate, like he was already practicing how it would feel to walk away from everything familiar. The words he almost said back at the party replayed in his head, over and over, refusing to stay quiet. His apartment was dark when he stepped inside. No decorations. No noise. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock on the wall. He dropped his keys into a bowl and stood there, coat still on, staring at the space like it belonged to someone else. This place had been his safe zone for years, but now it felt temporary, like a hotel room he was checking out of soon. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch and pulled out his phone. A message notification glowed on the screen. It was from his sister, sent earlier that night. Happy New Year. Hope this year brings you what you're looking for. He stared at it longer than necessary. She had no idea how close she was to the truth, or how far he was willing to go to find what he thought he needed. The idea of disappearing didn't start as a dramatic New Year resolution. It began quietly, almost harmlessly. Months ago, Daniel had taken a weekend trip alone, just to clear his head. No plans. No schedule. No one checking in. For the first time in years, he felt something close to peace. No one expected anything from him. No one needed him to be a certain version of himself. When the weekend ended and he returned home, the contrast hit hard. That was when the thought crept in. What if this didn't have to be temporary? At first he brushed it off. Everyone fantasizes about a fresh start now and then. But the thought didn't fade. It grew louder. Every time his alarm went off. Every time he smiled through a conversation that felt rehearsed. Every time he looked in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. This wasn't about adventure or rebellion. It was about escape, even if he didn't like admitting that. Over the next few weeks, Daniel started preparing in ways no one noticed. He cleaned out his closet, donating clothes he wouldn't need. He closed accounts he barely used. He stopped making long-term plans. When friends talked about future trips or events months away, he smiled but never committed. They thought he was just being cautious. They didn't know he was counting down. There was one night in particular that sealed everything. Daniel was at work late, alone in the office, staring at a screen filled with numbers that no longer meant anything to him. He realized he couldn't remember the last time he felt excited about tomorrow. Not nervous. Not busy. Excited. The silence of that realization scared him more than any dramatic crisis ever could. That was when he set a date in his mind. New Year's Day. A symbolic line between the life he had and the one he might still find. Back in his apartment, Daniel stood and walked to the small desk by the window. Inside the drawer was a sealed envelope. No name on it. Just paper, thick and slightly worn from being handled too many times. He hadn't opened it in weeks, but he knew exactly what was inside. Proof. Answers. And a reminder of why disappearing wasn't just a choice, but something that felt necessary. He didn't open it. Not yet. He placed it back in the drawer and closed it carefully, like disturbing it might set something irreversible in motion. The next morning, the city woke up slow and groggy, like it was nursing a collective headache. Daniel made coffee and stood by the window watching people walk past below. Couples laughed. Someone jogged with headphones on. Life continued, unaware of the decision pressing down on him. His phone buzzed again. Missed calls. Messages from friends asking if he was okay, if he meant what he said, if he wanted to talk. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he opened his laptop and stared at a map on the screen. Cities blurred together as he scrolled. He wasn't looking for excitement or opportunity. He was looking for anonymity. A place where no one would know his name or expect explanations. A place where his past couldn't catch up to him so easily. But even as he planned, doubt lingered. What if he was wrong? What if this shocking New Year resolution destroyed more than it fixed? He thought about his sister again. About the friend who looked at him like he was standing on the edge of something dangerous. About the people who would wake up one day and realize he was gone without a goodbye. The envelope in the desk drawer seemed to pulse in his thoughts. That was the part no one knew about. The reason he couldn't just stay and slowly change things like everyone suggested. There were consequences attached to his past that didn't disappear just because he wanted them to. Loose ends that refused to stay buried. This wasn't just about starting over. It was about getting out before something caught up to him. As the day went on, Daniel packed a small bag. Just essentials. He moved slowly, intentionally, as if speed might betray his nerves. Every object he picked up carried a memory. A concert ticket. A photo he forgot to frame. A book he never finished. He left most of it behind. He told himself memories were lighter when they stayed in the past. By evening, his phone buzzed again. A new message from an unknown number. No name. No context. Just a short sentence that made his stomach drop. We need to talk before you go. Daniel stared at the screen, heart pounding. He hadn't told anyone outside that apartment about his plans. No posts. No announcements. No hints. His fingers hovered over the phone, unsure whether to respond. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Outside, the sun dipped below the buildings, casting long shadows across the city. Daniel realized something then, something that sent a chill through him. Maybe disappearing wasn't as simple as he thought. Maybe the past wasn't done with him yet. He set the phone down without replying, eyes drifting back to the desk drawer. The envelope was still there. And whatever was inside it was running out of time. Daniel picked up the phone again, turning it over in his hand like it might bite him. The message stayed on the screen, unchanged, as if daring him to respond. He checked the number twice. No name. No saved contact. Just a reminder that someone out there knew more than they should. His first instinct was to ignore it, to pretend it was a wrong number or some late-night prank. But deep down he knew better. This message wasn't random. It was precise. It mentioned leaving, something only a handful of people even suspected. He walked to the window and looked down at the street. Cars moved slowly, headlights flickering on as darkness settled in. Somewhere out there was the person who sent that message. Someone who knew about his shocking New Year resolution before he was ready to face it himself. The thought made his chest tighten. Starting over was supposed to be clean. Controlled. But control was already slipping. Daniel thought back to the envelope again, the one thing tying all of this together. He finally pulled open the drawer and took it out, running his thumb along the edge. Inside were documents and notes he never intended to show anyone. Information that explained why his life had started feeling like it was closing in instead of opening up. It wasn't something illegal or dramatic, but it was personal, complicated, and powerful enough to change how people saw him. Enough to change everything. He sat down and opened it, spreading the contents across the desk. A folded letter. Old emails printed out. A photo he hadn't looked at in years. Each piece carried weight. Together, they formed a story he had spent a long time trying to outrun. This wasn't just about a New Year's resolution anymore. It was about truth, and whether he was brave enough to face it or reckless enough to run from it. His phone buzzed again. Same number. This time just 2 words. Please respond. Daniel closed his eyes. Another angle entered his mind, one he tried hard to avoid. What if disappearing didn't just affect him? What if his decision pulled other people into the fallout? He thought about his sister again. About the friend who sensed he wasn't telling the whole story. About the people who trusted him without knowing what he was carrying. Across town, his sister sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone, rereading his silence like it was a message of its own. She knew her brother well enough to recognize when he was pulling away. This wasn't just a phase. This felt final. She thought about calling him but stopped. She didn't want to push him further away. Still, a quiet fear settled in her chest. New Year resolutions were one thing. Vanishing was another. Back in his apartment, Daniel finally typed a reply. "Who is this?" The response came almost instantly. "Someone who knows what's in the envelope." His heart dropped. He stood up so fast the chair scraped loudly against the floor. That envelope had never left his apartment. No one had seen it. No one should even know it existed. His mind raced through possibilities. Had he been careless? Had someone been watching longer than he realized? "Where are you?" he typed, his hands shaking now. There was a pause this time. Long enough for doubt to creep back in. Then the message arrived. "Close enough to stop you. Far enough to stay safe." Daniel felt a surge of frustration mixed with fear. Whoever this was, they were playing a careful game. They didn't threaten him. They didn't explain themselves. They simply positioned themselves as a barrier between him and his escape. Another thought hit him then. What if disappearing wasn't just something he wanted, but something others wanted for him? Or didn't want at all? Maybe this was about control, about someone else deciding his future before he could. He looked around his apartment again, noticing details he'd overlooked. The faint scratch near the doorframe. The way the window didn't lock as tightly as it should. Small things he'd dismissed before suddenly felt significant. The city that once felt anonymous now felt crowded with unseen eyes. The phone buzzed again, this time with a longer message. "You don't have to run. But if you do, you should know what you're running toward." Daniel sank back into the chair. That sentence stayed with him. Running toward something, not just away. He'd convinced himself this New Year resolution was about freedom. But what if it was about fear? Fear of staying. Fear of being seen fully. Fear of confronting the past he'd boxed up in that envelope. At the same time, another part of him pushed back. Maybe this was manipulation. Maybe whoever was texting him wanted to keep him exactly where he was. Stuck. Predictable. He hated that they might be right about one thing. Disappearing was easier than explaining. Outside, a siren wailed briefly, then faded. The world kept moving while Daniel sat frozen between two futures. One where he followed through with his plan, changed his name, his city, his identity. Another where he stayed and faced questions he wasn't sure he could answer. His friend from the party texted again, asking if he could come by. Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't risk bringing anyone else into this, not yet. But isolation came with its own cost. The more he kept to himself, the louder his thoughts became. He picked up the photo from the desk, studying it closely. It showed a younger version of him, smiling in a way that felt unfamiliar now. That person believed in something. Believed he could build a life without hiding parts of himself. Daniel wondered when that changed and whether disappearing would help him find that version again or erase it completely. Another message came through. "Meet me. Tomorrow. If you want answers." Daniel stared at the screen, pulse racing. Answers were dangerous. They had a way of forcing decisions. And decisions were exactly what he'd been trying to delay by turning his life into a shocking New Year resolution instead of a confrontation. He typed slowly. "Where?" A location appeared. Familiar. Too familiar. A place tied to the contents of the envelope, to a chapter of his life he thought was closed. Daniel leaned back and let out a shaky breath. Whatever was coming next, he knew one thing for sure. Disappearing wouldn't be simple anymore. Someone had pulled his past into the present, and the countdown he thought ended on New Year's Eve had only just begun. He closed the laptop, slipped the envelope into his bag and checked the lock on the door twice. Tomorrow he would either take another step toward vanishing, or be forced to face everything he was trying to leave behind. Daniel had just returned from the cafe, his mind buzzing with clarity and relief. He thought he had finally faced the weight of the envelope and taken his first real step toward living honestly. The city around him glimmered with winter lights, the streets quiet, and for a moment he allowed himself to breathe. But as he reached his apartment and set the envelope carefully on his desk, his phone buzzed again. The screen flashed with a number he didn't recognize. At first he hesitated. He had promised himself to take small steps, to not rush into new complications. But a part of him couldn't ignore it. With a shaky hand he answered. "Hello?" he said, voice wary. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, low, and deliberate. "Daniel. You think you've handled everything, but you've only scratched the surface." He froze. The calm he had built over the past hours evaporated instantly. "Who is this?" he demanded, gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "You've been carrying secrets you didn't even know you couldn't outrun." The envelope, it was only the beginning. Daniel's mind raced. He had thought the envelope contained the full story, the letters, the photos, the printed emails, But now this stranger was suggesting there was more, something he hadn't uncovered. "What do you want from me?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Not what I want," the voice said. "What the people watching want. You can't run this time. You're out of options." The line went dead. Daniel's heart pounded. He sank into the chair, staring at the phone, then at the envelope. Questions flooded his mind. Who was watching him? How long had they been watching? And what else could possibly exist in the past he thought he understood? He tried to think logically. The woman at the cafe had seemed trustworthy, guiding him through the envelope's revelations. Could this be related to her? Or was it someone entirely different, someone with intentions he didn't yet understand? Daniel felt a rising panic. The shocking New Year resolution that had nearly defined his life now seemed trivial compared to this new threat. He opened the envelope again, searching for any clue he might have missed. Every letter, every note, every photo was scrutinized under a new lens. For the first time he realized there were patterns he hadn't noticed before. Subtle references, coded phrases, even a hint of a name that seemed out of place. It was as if someone had left breadcrumbs, anticipating that he would come back to them eventually. The next day Daniel decided to follow one of the hints. It led him to an old office building downtown, abandoned and cold. He stepped inside cautiously, phone in hand, heartbeat echoing off the empty walls. Something about the silence felt wrong, unnatural. He had expected dust and emptiness, but he also felt eyes on him. Every creak of the floorboards amplified the sense of danger. Then he saw it, a man in the shadows, tall, wearing a dark coat, face partially obscured. He stepped forward slowly, hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. "Daniel," the man said, voice calm but firm. "I know what you've discovered. And now you're in over your head." Daniel froze. His first instinct was to run, but something about the man's presence demanded he listen. "Who are you?" Daniel asked, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "A friend. Or maybe the last person who can help you," the man replied. The envelope wasn't the end. "There are people who don't want you asking questions, and they've been waiting for the moment you felt safe." The words hit Daniel like a punch. He had thought his clarity and the steps he'd taken toward honesty were enough. He realized now that facing his past might have drawn attention from forces he couldn't predict. People who wanted control over information he didn't even fully understand. "I don't understand," Daniel said. "What could anyone possibly want from me?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small folder. This is what they're after. And it's bigger than you, bigger than the envelope, and bigger than what you've prepared for. If you leave this alone, they will follow. If you take it, you risk everything. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his chest. The envelope had seemed like the most critical part of his life, the shocking New Year resolution he almost carried out. But now, this new revelation suggested that his actions could trigger consequences far beyond what he had imagined. Running away might not be enough. Disappearing might no longer be an option. The man stepped closer. "You need to decide quickly. There's little time, and every choice carries consequences you can't undo." Daniel's mind raced. For the first time, he realized that honesty and courage alone weren't enough. The past he had thought he understood was a web, and every thread he touched pulled him deeper into conflict he couldn't escape. He thought about his sister, his friends, the life he had been rebuilding. Now, protecting them might require the kind of risk he had always feared, risk that could redefine everything he knew about freedom, safety, and trust. The man handed him the folder and stepped back. "It's your move, Daniel. But remember, once you take this step, there's no turning back." Daniel stared at the folder in his hands, feeling the weight of both choice and consequence. The shocking New Year resolution that had once seemed like a dramatic turning point now felt like the first ripple in a tidal wave. The stakes were higher, the rules unknown, and the clock was ticking faster than ever. He thought about the envelope, the letters, the woman at the cafe, and the mysterious stranger on the phone. Every clue had led him here, and every decision he had made had been carefully observed. Daniel realized he was no longer just facing his past, he was facing a hidden world connected to it, one that could change his life permanently. As he stepped out of the abandoned building, folder in hand, the winter wind bit at his face. He felt the city around him differently now, not just as a place of reflection, but as a stage for challenges he hadn't anticipated. Shadows seemed deeper, lights flickered with meaning, and every passerby could be connected to secrets he hadn't yet uncovered. Daniel's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden phone buzz. Another message. Unknown number. This one read, "You're closer than you think. But not everyone will survive the truth." The words froze him in place. Fear surged, but so did determination. He had come too far to turn back, and now he realized running would not protect him or anyone he cared about. He had to face what was coming, no matter how dangerous, no matter how shocking the revelations. Tucking the envelope and the new folder into his bag, Daniel took a deep breath and started walking toward the river, toward the next meeting, toward the unknown that awaited him. Every step carried tension, every decision amplified the stakes, and every shadow hinted at the danger lurking just beyond sight. The shocking New Year resolution that had once defined him was no longer just a personal challenge. It had become the first chapter in a story that could change his life forever. And Daniel knew one thing for certain. The next choice he made would decide everything, and there would be no going back. Daniel followed the river walk in silence, the cold winter air biting at his face, each step heavy with anticipation. The folder in his bag felt like it carried the weight of the world. Every message, every envelope, every decision had led him here, to the edge of understanding, and to the moment where everything he had been running from would demand a confrontation. The meeting point was a small warehouse near the docks, dimly lit by a single flickering lamp. Shadows stretched across the walls, and Daniel's heartbeat echoed in his ears. He pushed the door open cautiously, expecting emptiness or a trap, but instead he found the woman from the cafe waiting, standing beside the tall man who had handed him the folder. Both of them looked serious, almost relieved to see him arrive. "Daniel," the woman said softly, "this is it. Everything you've learned, everything you've been hiding from yourself, it all comes together here." He nodded, gripping the folder tightly. "I thought I understood it all. The envelope, the letters, the emails. But now it feels like I'm only scratching the surface." The tall man stepped forward. "You are," he said. "The envelope was just the start. What's in your hands now is the proof of why people have been watching. It's bigger than you imagined, bigger than anyone expected." Daniel opened the folder carefully. Inside were documents revealing a long-forgotten betrayal involving someone he had trusted deeply years ago. Someone whose actions had impacted not just him, but several people in his community. It connected back to his own life, to opportunities he'd lost, and to secrets he thought were safely buried. "Everything you've been feeling, the tension, the fear, it wasn't just about your past," the woman explained. "It was about power. About control. About truth that someone wanted to remain hidden. And now you have a choice, expose it or walk away and let it continue." Daniel's mind raced. He thought about disappearing, about running, about the New Year resolution he had once almost carried out. But now, standing here, the stakes were higher than personal escape. This was about justice, accountability, and making a decision that could ripple far beyond himself. He looked at the folder again. Names, dates, evidence, it all fit together like pieces of a puzzle. His hands shook slightly, but his resolve hardened. "I can't ignore it," he said finally. "I can't run anymore. It's time to face this." The woman nodded. "We'll help you. You won't do this alone." Together they began planning. Calls would be made, documents verified, people informed. Daniel realized that his shocking New Year resolution had evolved into something far greater. A mission to confront hidden truths and hold the responsible parties accountable. Fear still lingered, but it was balanced now with purpose. Hours later, after the first step of the plan was executed, Daniel stepped outside, the cold air filling his lungs like a promise of clarity. He felt exhausted but alive. The weight of the envelope and the folder had lifted slightly, replaced with the understanding that courage and honesty were more powerful than avoidance. But as he walked toward the street, a familiar chill ran down his spine. His phone buzzed again. A known number. A sinking feeling spread through him. He opened the message, eyes widening as he read the words. "You did well. But he's already watching. He knows what you've done. Be careful, Daniel." His heart skipped a beat. "Who?" he muttered under his breath. Before he could react further, a shadow shifted across the sidewalk. A figure stepped into the light. Daniel froze. And then, with a slow, deliberate motion, the figure pulled back their hood. It was his sister. But her eyes were different. Cold, calculating, almost unrecognizable. "I knew you would do this," she said softly, almost a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal. "And now, Daniel, you've left me no choice." Daniel stumbled backward, the folder clattering to the ground. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Everything he had been protecting, every secret he had been holding close, had been seen through by the person he trusted most. "You were going to disappear," she continued, "but you didn't. And now you've exposed everything. You're lucky I care enough to let you live with what comes next." Daniel's mind raced. He realized that even as he had thought he was resolving the main conflicts, facing his past, taking responsibility, confronting hidden truths. Another layer had been hiding in plain sight. His sister had known more than he ever imagined. She had been silently monitoring, waiting for the moment he made a choice, and now she was positioned to decide what happened next. He took a slow breath, steadying himself. I don't understand. Why? She stepped closer, voice soft but firm. Because some truths aren't just about justice, Daniel. Some truths are about timing, about who's ready to handle them. You were ready. Now, I need to know if you can handle the consequences. Daniel's thoughts raced. Fear, relief, and betrayal collided in a swirl of emotion. The shocking New Year resolution that had seemed like his own private battle had led him to a climax far beyond his imagination. The envelope, the folder, the hidden watchers, all of it had been a test. Not just of his courage, but of his ability to navigate the complexities of trust, family, and consequence. I'll face it, he said finally, voice steady despite the chaos inside. I'll face everything. I've come too far to turn back now. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, then stepped aside. Good. Then let's see what the world does with the truth. Daniel picked up the folder and the envelope, feeling the weight again, but this time with a sense of readiness. He knew the path ahead would be challenging, full of obstacles and scrutiny, but he also knew he had learned the value of courage, honesty, and perseverance. As he turned to leave the warehouse, a final message flashed across his phone. Unknown number. One line. Not everything is as it seems. Watch the next move carefully. He's closer than you know. Daniel froze, realizing that even though he had resolved the main conflicts, even though he had faced his past and chosen to act with honesty, the story wasn't over. There was another player in the shadows, someone who had been manipulating events without his knowledge. The night air felt colder, the city darker, but Daniel's resolve burned brighter than ever. He understood now that life's challenges were rarely straightforward, and courage wasn't about finishing battles. It was about standing firm, even when the next one appeared without warning. With a deep breath, he stepped into the streets, folder and envelope secure, heart steady, mind sharp. The shocking New Year resolution that had begun as a personal challenge had transformed into a journey of truth, courage, and unexpected twists. One that he knew would continue to test him, but that he was finally ready to face. And as the city lights reflected in puddles along the street, Daniel couldn't help but smile faintly, knowing that sometimes the greatest lessons come not from endings, but from the unexpected turns that challenge everything you thought you knew. Daniel didn't sleep much that night. The city outside his window was quiet, the way it always felt just before dawn, but inside him, every thought raced like fireworks gone rogue. He kept picturing the meeting spot from the message, the small cafe near the river he hadn't visited in years, the one he used to go to when he needed space to think. He dressed carefully, keeping his bag light, but carrying the envelope close to his chest. This wasn't just about plans anymore. It was about answers, closure, and maybe even forgiveness. By the time he stepped outside, the early morning air was crisp, filled with the faint smell of winter smoke and coffee brewing from nearby shops. The streets were mostly empty, giving him a sense of control he hadn't felt in months. He walked briskly, thinking about everything he had left behind, the apartment, his friends, the routine that had started to feel suffocating. Part of him still wanted to vanish completely, start over somewhere nobody knew him. But another part, the part that always lingered quietly in the back of his mind, wondered if running away would solve anything at all. When he reached the cafe, he hesitated at the door, scanning the small, familiar interior. A figure waved from the corner booth. It was a woman, middle-aged, kind but firm, with eyes that seemed to hold every answer and every warning at once. She gestured for him to sit, and Daniel did, careful not to open his bag. He felt a tangle of relief and dread in equal measure. "You made it," she said softly. Her voice carried no judgment, just recognition. Daniel nodded, unable to speak at first. The envelope sat heavy on the table between them, a symbol of all the secrets and choices he had carried for so long. She gestured toward it. "You know why you're here," she said. Daniel took a deep breath and opened the envelope. The papers inside weren't threatening exactly, but they were enough to explain why his life had felt so complicated, so impossible to manage on his own. There were letters from someone he had trusted long ago, apologies he never received, and reminders of decisions he thought he had buried. The photo he had noticed earlier, a memory of himself smiling, full of hope, was there, along with notes that made him realize how much he had grown without even noticing. She watched him carefully as he sifted through it all. "You've carried this alone for too long," she said. "No wonder you feel like disappearing. But running doesn't erase what's happened. Facing it does. Daniel looked up at her. I thought leaving would make it stop. That if I vanished, none of this would matter. She shook her head gently. Vanishing doesn't erase your life. It just hides it. Your past, your choices, they follow you until you acknowledge them. Her words hit harder than he expected. The truth was undeniable. Running had always felt like freedom, but in reality, it had been avoidance. Daniel leaned back, absorbing the lesson. He thought about his sister, his friend, the people he cared about who didn't even know the half of it. He realized that disappearing would have caused more pain than staying and dealing with the truth. The shocking New Year resolution that had seemed so liberating now felt like a test, one he hadn't realized he needed to pass. The woman smiled softly. You're not alone in this. You never were. The envelope isn't meant to scare you or trap you. It's meant to help you see everything clearly so you can decide what to do next. Daniel nodded slowly, a sense of calm settling in his chest for the first time in months. He thought about the next steps. He could reach out to the people who mattered, explain himself, apologize where needed, and start rebuilding relationships that had been strained. He didn't have to erase his life to create a better version of it. He just had to face it honestly. When he left the cafe, the city felt different. The streets were the same, the buildings unchanged, but Daniel walked with a new perspective. He still carried the envelope, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was a tool, a reminder of why he needed to confront his past rather than flee from it. He stopped at a corner and called his sister. She answered on the first ring, and for a moment they both stayed silent, letting the connection fill the space between them. Hey, she said finally, a small tremor of hope in her voice. Daniel smiled, the kind of smile that comes from relief rather than happiness, and said, Hey, I want to explain everything. By the time he hung up, the morning sun had broken fully over the city, casting golden light across the streets. Daniel felt lighter but not unburdened. He understood now that facing life's challenges didn't mean they were easy. It meant being brave enough to stand in the middle of them, even when fear still lingered. Over the next few weeks, Daniel took small steps. He reached out to friends he had distanced himself from, slowly repairing trust that had frayed. He explained the shocking New Year resolution he had almost carried out, and while some were confused, most were relieved he hadn't acted on it. His sister became his anchor, helping him sort through old regrets, showing him that he could honor the past without letting it define him. The envelope, once a symbol of fear and secrecy, became a guide. He read through the letters and notes again, this time understanding them for what they were. Pieces of a puzzle that could finally help him make sense of his life. He didn't need to vanish to find clarity. He just needed honesty, courage, and patience. Months later, Daniel stood in the same city, but everything felt different. He had kept his job, maintained his apartment, but he approached life with a new mindset. Every interaction, every decision was colored by the lessons he had learned, that running away only delays the inevitable, that confrontation leads to growth, and that the people who matter will often stand by you if you let them in. One evening, he walked past the cafe where he had finally faced the envelope and the woman who had guided him. He smiled at the memory, a quiet acknowledgement of how close he had come to making a decision that could have changed everything forever. He didn't regret feeling lost, he only wished he had sought help sooner. Daniel realized that his life didn't need to be erased to be transformed. The shocking New Year resolution had been a wake-up call, a signal that he had been ignoring the most important part of life: connection, accountability, and self-awareness. By choosing to stay, to face the truth, and to rebuild relationships, he had discovered a freedom far deeper than vanishing ever could provide. The key takeaway lingered in his mind: courage isn't always about making bold moves or escaping the past. Sometimes it's about standing still long enough to confront it and letting it guide you toward a better future. Daniel walked home that night, envelope safely tucked away, heart steady, and the city alive around him. He knew challenges would come, old fears would return, but now he had learned how to meet them without disappearing. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt fully present. Not because his past was perfect or because everything had been resolved, but because he had chosen to face life honestly. The shocking New Year resolution that had nearly changed his life had instead taught him the most valuable lesson of all: that true freedom comes not from running away, but from owning your story and moving forward with intention. The city lights glimmered around him, reflections and puddles from an earlier rain. The cold winter air no longer felt like a weight. It felt like clarity. Daniel smiled to himself, knowing that while the future was still uncertain, he had the tools, the people, and the courage to face it. For the first time in a long time, he believed in the promise of the new year, not as a deadline for escape, but as a chance to live fully, openly, and with purpose. And in that quiet, simple truth, Daniel finally found peace.